Without Walls returns with a double bill of debauchery and bigotry. After the break, a television debut for Lucretia Borgia. But first, a final appearance from Alf Garnett.
If there is any hope, it lies with the proles, wrote George Orwell. Not bad for an old Etonian. He meant, of course, the working class. In wartime, they stood for the best of British. But today, this happy breed face a more subtle fascism, a political correctness that is driving the old guard underground. And for the cultural style troopers, there is one face they can't bury deep enough. Alf Garnett. A royalist, a loyalist, a bigger and proud of it. Alf Garnett, that ragged-trousered reactionary, has come to epitomise an English working-class patriotism that in today's PC climate seems positively revolutionary. Alf Garnett, a satirical creation worthy of Swift or Hogarth, taken from the public bar to the box via the savage wit of Johnny Spate until death us do part. Alf Garnett, a big mouth on the small screen, bigger than the comic intent of his creator, bigger even than the series that begat him. Alf Garnett, angry old man and armchair warrior, clocked into the nation's consciousness when England's pendulum was in full swing. In 1966, we could allow ourselves Alf. England was awash with self-confidence.
An opening in the defence and achieved the hat-trick.
To be young, English and working class was to have the world at your feet. English popular culture ruled the airwaves, and it was hip to fly the flag, or wear it.
Just like I want them.
But not everyone was high on peace and love.
Bloody hooligans. We ought to brand them. Put branding irons across the foreheads. Brand them for life. Brand them all so we can see them and whack them and belt them, castrate them and then string them up.
The reason why he was so popular was that at that time he touched a particular vein. You know, 1966 was that great sort of like year of schism, if you like, between the sort of like the clean-cut boys that won the World Cup, Morhurst and Peters, and those sort of long-haired mop tops from Liverpool, you know, growing their hair and getting involved in a sort of cultural explosion.
Liverpool? A load of old rubbish, you know. I mean, they couldn't even beat a few lousy crowds out there.
It was a success almost immediately. People were rushing home to watch it. I mean, the streets were cleared when it was on. Whether they agree with him, I don't know. Whether they saw him as satire, I don't know. But I don't think it's important anyway that he just was airing views that were, I suppose it was like lifting the lid off a boiling pot, like, you know, all the steam came out.
You said he was born in Manchester, so well, he ain't a proper blackie then, is he? I mean, the ones I'm talking about, they're your proper blacks, aren't they? The ones that was born in a jungle, your natives.
Alf Garnett returned to the English comic tradition. Working people, rude mechanicals, as Shakespeare called them, were not supposed to be tragic figures, they were comic figures. In Macbeth, which is one of the darkest of his tragedies, he has a drunken doorkeeper come on and talk to the audience rather in the same way as Alf Garnett does. And Alf Garnett was a return to this tradition in the sense that he talks to you. It's not so much dialogue, he's orating, he is holding forth. He is a fount of working class wisdom.
Working class wisdom was chic in the 60s. Joan Littlewood in the theatre, the Fab Four in the charts, and the Craze in the Double R Club. They all held court, and the smart arts establishment lapped it up. But Alf offered a more dangerous edge.
Oh, bring the bloody wogs into it.
No, look, just a minute.
No, you look. You bloody look for a...
Alf put the boot into every taboo going. Race, religion, the permissive society. He was a liberal's worst nightmare.
Wogs!
God almighty! It was Enoch who first brought out the colours. He was the first to go on about it and saying all that about excretia through letterboxes.
Before, a lot of the stuff that had been on the telly about working class people was written by middle class people. And all of a sudden, there's Alf Garnett on the television and being sort of not politically correct, although there wasn't that sort of phrase, wasn't around then, and he was actually speaking for a working class that wasn't going to rise up and save us, or a working class that wasn't going to be, you know, come the revolution, that wasn't going to save us. It was, you know, he's speaking for a working class that was as xenophobic and as materialist and as old-fashioned, if you like, as the rest of society.
Hey, that's enough of that. All that swearing, I won't have it.
Look at him, he's always Lord Mary.
Yeah, well, I'm not having you, Lord Mary, not in this house.
Why not?
Because it ain't bloody ladylike, that's why.
Well, I didn't like Alf. And I think I didn't like Alf because I was frightened of what he was exposing. So it wasn't an idealised image. So it was probably quite an important lesson to me to watch that exposure so that I could think of starting to tackle it. And I hope I've learned a lot in my political life about if you want to change attitudes on those very sensitive issues of, you know, gender, race, sexuality, even on things like moral issues like capital punishment, abortion, those sort of issues. You've got to start from where people are at.
All I'm saying is I just can't stand people going around calling other people coons and sambos.
No, me.
You're right, because, I mean, that Dr. Chingala, he's a good doctor.
Good doctor, Ghetto.
He's a good doctor. Just a moment, point of information, what did he ever do for me then, eh? Ghetto, all he done for me, he looks down my throat, breathes curry all over me and sends me off to see a specialist.
Alf didn't quite dominate my life, but it was an essential part of my day. I didn't miss a single episode. And it was great entertainment. I look forward to it, and it made me smile on a cold and miserable winter's night when I had no money. That is what good programs do.
Alf Garnett acted as a release for all the frustrations of working-class England. In the East End of London, immigration wasn't new. The Irish, Huguenots and Jews might not have been welcomed, but they were eventually accepted. Humour helped. In today's climate, assimilation is more difficult, and the broadcasting barons are playing safe on anything to do with race. The BBC have forked out for a new series of Alf, but have bottled out of making it.
I think it's down to political correctness that Alf is not on the air at the moment. That's the only reason I can see for it. I have a feeling sometimes that the BBC has never forgiven me for doing Two Deaths Apart in the first place. There are obviously certain elements there that don't like it. I'm rather he wasn't on the air.
Political correctness frightens me. It represents the bankruptcy of thought. I hate ignorant people acting on my behalf or speaking on my behalf. I'm not ashamed to say I've grown up in English literature. That is what my parents insisted that was part of my education and development. I take that seriously. I don't take these half-assed comments about Alf is racist seriously.
There is a great deal of censorship going on in the whole cultural field today. The whole question of race in this country is never debated. It is a taboo subject, it is out of bounds, it can only be debated or even mentioned within the official terms approved by the race relations industry. Anything outside that is taboo. So we have a whole system of censorship being built up in this country. It is to suit the prejudices and the whims of the left-wing middle-class intelligentsia.
So who are these outsiders, this new cultural elite, this all-powerful culturati? Who are these Alf attackers, the fault police of the middle-class left who decide what constitutes art, entertainment, comedy and culture? Behold, the opposition, identified. Dressed up in Nicole Fahy or down in Doc Martens, they lunch in Soho, sleep in Islington and spend their holidays down and out of it in Provence and Tuscany. All that unites them is their voraciousness for other cultures and their ignorance of their own. Racked with guilt about the empire, they urge today's immigrants not to assimilate, but to embrace the cultures they've left behind. You can have Greek pride, Bengali pride, African pride. The only pride you can't have is English pride. And of course, mother's pride. Glumly discovering the joys of ciabatta, polenta or sushi, they urge Alf to dance to their politically correct tune. Turn up the world music. Not. So what is English working class culture? The folk memory already sounds like folk lore. Tales of when it was safe to leave your door open in the summer and let the kids play out. Of when life revolved around the family and the dinner table, as depicted in the House of Garnett. Of a time when everybody knew everyone else and rallied round when things got tough. And you know what? It's all true. It is a culture that appears impenetrable to the outsider. To the middle-class culturati, the English working-class way of life seems as hard to fathom as Masonic ritual. So they either write it off or try and rewrite it to fit their view of what working-class life should be like. The culturati like the working class to be down and out in a non-speaking part, cast in the role of victim.
Here, pan that lot of banana, free man a banana.
But the working class aren't passive proles. Theirs is a street-sharp oral tradition.
Of course you can.
Words are both currency and ammunition.
Free man again for a pound. Oh, my, can't get it in. Price up.
So with Alf, week in, week out, opinions fell like spittle from his lips.
Yeah, as seen on Police 5.
All held up to ridicule by his silly moo missus, his liberated daughter, and most of all by Mike, his long-haired, scouse git of a son-in-law.
How would you like it if I called you a yid? What are you talking about, yid? I ain't a yid! You're Jewish, aren't you? I ain't not Jewish! You are! You know you are!
I think the character of Mike represents the everything that the Tories hate about the permissive 60s. You know, sort of like a young, cocky, knows, you know, happy with himself, as an answer for everything that comes out of Alf's mouth. And he's always pushing Alf into sort of, you know, rages as Alf realises that the culture is changing as he watches it.
You never told me you was Jewish.
It was always a tremendous moment when he was defied, when his world went into a frenzy. And what is important about it is that different people saw it differently. And it had all the ingredients of good drama. There's this enormous clash of right. You know, everybody was right. He was right. His son-in-law was right. Everybody felt that they were right. And everybody could call upon the viewers, sections of them, to support this or that argument. So it was overall beautiful drama.
But in England in 1994, there is no longer a dramatic dialogue, only cant. The heart has gone from the docks where Alf shouted the odds, and culturally, there's only one voice to be heard. The spiritual heirs of the Scouse Git have won. The walls say it all with their supposed community art, a stirring utopian vision of multiculturalism, but as redundant to the lives of the people who live here as anything at the Tate. Today, the cultural horizons of the workers are set by a chattering class that holds them in contempt.
The working class must occasionally grit its collective teeth at the kind of stuff that is imposed upon them by their cultural betters, particularly when it masquerades as working class art. I mean, there's these people who go all over the East End, chalking up all kinds of painting things on the walls and so on, and pretending it's working class art. But of course, the working class don't want to have anything to do with it.
In recent years, the streets of the old East End have been colonised by some 15,000 artists, more per square foot than anywhere else in Europe. But this is head art that appeals only to the middle classes. They don't accept that the working class has always had its own art that is just as valid, but which is art of the heart. Alf knew where to find it.
Hey, I'll come and add goals, the last of them now to clear them up. We're like, no, come on, just to clear now goals. You want to be...
The working class definitely have a sense of aesthetics, but it's not really, doesn't really conform to the high art, capital H, capital A. The middle class can't deal with the fact that working class people can be affluent, but have their aspirations of the middle class, but not share the sort of like the aesthetics and the taste. You know, that they get some wonga and they spend it on something garish, which I think is great. And you know, if you look at the decorations of Alf Garnett's house, I mean, you know, all these old pictures in and stuff.
And here is the nub of the relationship between the culturati and the working class. They dismiss working class taste like this as sentimental, and yet when it's taken up by a fashionable artist like Jeff Koons, proletarian pieces that even Alf wouldn't give house room to are suddenly treated by the culturati as important. So what is going on here? Double standards, liberal elitism, or plain old-fashioned snobbery? Most liberals wandering in here would imagine they'd stumbled into a neo-fascist knees-up. Wrong. It's my local working man's club celebrating St George's Day, the English Saints' Day that's curiously overlooked by British broadcasting. The culturati are embarrassed by any show of feeling, and particularly frightened by patriotism. They assume that by its nature it's reactionary. Wrong again. England produced Shelley as well as Drake, Robin Hood as well as Wellington, Jerusalem as well as Land of Hope and Glory.
If you get a Guardian reader or an independent reader, he wouldn't be seen dead with the Union Jack. They regard that as something vaguely vulgar, disgusting, out of date, and morally detestable. The British working classes have no such feeling. They are always patriotic, they always applaud Britishness, and they think that Britain is still a great country. The middle classes just hold their nose when the word Britain is introduced, and England still more.
In 1966, I could understand the element of patriotism that Alf and a lot of people shared, people who were radicals even. But today, patriotism is on the retreat, isn't it? Patriotism really reeks these days of something conspiratorial and evil and venal. When you say that, this one get very frightened. Where's Alf Garnett saying, well, the flag?
This is National Socialism in action, dressed in the stolen clothes of patriotism. When the British National Party won a short-lived local election victory, their man, Derek Beacon, was immediately labelled an Alf Garnett figure.
The British people have had enough. We're going to take our country back.
Grossly unfair on Alf, Beacon appears to be deeply humourless. But that's the problem. To today's TV establishment, race is nearer to the knuckle than sex will ever be. Yet there's no natural forum to air the issues, and without that, the territory is surrendered to the extremists. The phony patriotism of the far right is based on a philosophy of hatred. They have been allowed to hijack all the authentic elements of Englishness for themselves. Theirs is not the patriotism of the working class. It's not my patriotism. It's not even Alf's. Genuine patriotism is built not on hatred, but on hope and on pride. And on openness.
It's a pity old Enoch ain't in charge, mate.
There we go again.
Yeah, he'd have the solution, don't worry about it. Yeah.
Very good.
He put the coons down the pits, well, that's what...
Was Alf a racist? Of course he was. He was a misogynist and a xenophobe to boot. Not a man you'd want as your next-door neighbour. But the real problem for the apparatchiks of PC is that he was funny. He made 20 million people laugh. And there's the dilemma.
Of course, humour can be dangerous, but equally, treating these very difficult and complex attitudes and values in a serious way could equally be dangerous. You won't necessarily get the outcome that you want.
When you start to think about controlling humour, the very essence of Englishness is subverted. And yet, in the name of political correctness, Alf has already been exiled to the gulag of the samizdat working-class comedians. Banged up on video with Jimmy Jones, Chubby Brown, Mike Reid and co, he's now judged too dangerously illiberal to be released on the airwaves.
I feel now like the dissident must have felt in Russia, where you have to do proscribed writing. You mustn't attack anything or criticise anything. Comedy's only real function, in my opinion, is to be critical, and all great comedy has been critical of its age, of the age it lives in. It's been critical, even the days of the court jester. His only function was to be critical and bring to the monarch's notice things that were being said around him that he didn't know about.
1, 2, 3, 4. Marlborough Street, good. I wanted that, I shall buy that.
Multi-million-pound sales in the video stores suggest that people still prefer the comedians to the culturati. But since when did the audience know what was funny?
He's got it, hasn't he? Oh, has he? Well, Daddy can pay for it.
I think language is important because language is a way which reflects our attitudes and our values. And that's why it's important to use language which isn't racist, which isn't sexist, which doesn't condemn disadvantaged groups in our society.
You bloody silly moon. I can stuff your head full of any old daft rubbish, can't I?
When Alf referred to blacks as coons and sambos and coming from the jungle and all of that, for some reason I didn't feel offended. I mean, you might have to bring a psychiatrist to ask me why not, but I didn't feel offended. As I look at it now, is that he was on the demise. That wasn't an energetic movement overwhelming me in the society. Because sitting next to me on the television would be my wife, my ex-wife, and she says, "Shut your bloody mouth." We talked back to the television, you know, that's another thing. Alf wasn't, we didn't allow him, we didn't sit piously and allow him to get away with it. She would scream back at him, "Shut your bloody mouth, who's a coon, you bald-headed git." And so we would be, that is a program that had audience response.
How are you going to get them bees to sting your rheumatism?
I don't know yet.
They don't know where your rheumatism is, do they?
But I do.
Oh. Look, don't you...
I always say I never created Alf Garnett. Society created him, I just grasped on him. He's a lout. He's a loutish, ignorant, raucous pea-brain. But a society that is frightened to see an Alf Garnett reflecting some of the worst elements of that society is a society that is in deep trouble, I think. You know, if it cannot look at that and see it as a truth.
So where is Alf when society needs him most? He's being held indefinitely at that looby anchor of political correctness, London's South Bank.
Well, I have looked at Channel 4, but I ain't never seen nothing on there that was worth looking at that much.
But if the culturati think they can kill Alf's spirit by putting him in a museum, they must have the collective IQ of a plate of stewed eels. Alf may never again be seen on our screens, but my abiding image of him is one of him ranting and raving at the TV. He may be dead, but he'll never lie down. And so, in the words of the poet Shelley, words that I think Alf would appreciate, men of England, rise like lions from your slumbers, in unvanquishable numbers. Shake to earth your chains like dew, which in your sleep have fallen upon you. You are many, they, the culturati, are few.